And now it's time for some Q&A from you, the viewers. And this first question came in about the equipment that I use to cover my trip to CES. And I've been refining my field pack over the years, and I've got it all down now into pretty much a single backpack. So let's take a look at the bag here. In fact, I haven't yet unpacked the bag since my trip. So let's go through here and see what we got. Now, before I go into the bag, I did have one other bag here. This is a small tripod from Manfrotto that I got, and I look at B&H a lot because they have this sale thing that pops up on their website every day, and there's always something cool that gets reduced in price significantly, and this tripod was one of those things. I think I got this for like $100, and it's really compact, but it's also very sturdy. I have another tripod that I bought from a B&H sale a couple of years ago that was carbon fiber. It weighed like 1.5 pounds, but as my cameras have gotten more stuff attached to them, they've gotten heavier and the tripod got very wobbly. This one's a nice little video tripod here that is also very compact. Now, we didn't use the tripod throughout most of the trip, but when we do the interview with Silicon Dust, for example, it's nice to have a static camera that we can use to keep everything locked down. So let's open up the bag here and see what is inside. We'll start, of course, with the camera, which is what is probably the most important part of the kit. This is a PXW X70 from Sony. Usually I have the plate a little further back here on the camera, but I just wanted to make sure I could remember the model name. I bought this camera 3 years ago, and this shows you that if you buy the right thing, you can often get a lot of life out of it. Now, this camera, when I bought it, was only a 1080p camera, but it has since been upgraded. They had a firmware update about 1.5 years ago or so to bring it up to 4K. That was a purchase thing, but because I bought it when I did, I got a pretty decent sized rebate on that 4K update. And they recently pushed out a second firmware update that upped the bit rate of that 4K recording from 60 megabits per second to 100 megabits per second. And they also added face recognition for the 4K shooting mode, which it didn't do before that other update came down. That second update was a free one. So this camera keeps getting better. They just do firmware updates and everything gets improved on it. It has a 1-inch sensor and really is a very nice quality camera from an image standpoint. I think I paid about $2,300 for it when I bought it, maybe a little bit more for that initial firmware update. And what I like about it, first of all, is that it works very well. The image quality is great. It also has these XLR inputs, which I'll show you in a second for the audio input. And overall, it's just a nice camera that is professional and works. But the cool thing is that it uses consumer batteries. So if you have one of these consumer batteries, you are good to go. They're not that expensive. And we're finding, just from this kind of work that we do at CES, is that this battery lasts all day on this camera, which is remarkable. So it's really been a wonderful addition to the pack here. I haven't reviewed it just because there's so much depth to this camera as a pro-level camera that I just haven't really gotten into yet with it, but I'm very happy with it. My only disappointment with the camera is that its autofocus is very slow. I had initially bought this with the intention of it being a studio camera, but the autofocus on it is just too slow for me at this point, but it does work great when you're out in the field and doing that kind of stuff. So that is the main camera. And then for audio, I've got this little pack of stuff here. I use the Sennheiser AVX system, and one of these came in free of charge through the Amazon Vine program, but I bought a second kit. And what Sennheiser's AVX consists of are these little receiver units here that plug right into the input here on the camera. So they just snap right into place here with the XLR connector. If I can get it in while I'm on camera, that would be helpful. They have some adjustability to them as well. It snaps in like that, you turn it on, and then it pairs up with a mic. And I have both a lavalier mic that I use here in the studio. In fact, my second AVX is always attached to my main audio board here for the TriCaster. I can just take it with me when I go on trips. But what I do when I'm out in the show floor, because it's so noisy, is I use their stick mic here. And what I did add to it was a cardioid mic that Sennheiser was kind enough to send to the show. And the reason why I go with the cardioid mic is that it is very directional. So it only really picks up audio directly on the top of the mic and kind of just filters out everything around it. The one challenge with this is that I tend to hold the microphone at a different height, and then when I get back to edit, my audio is all over the place and I have to make some adjustments with it. So it's very, very directional, but it's also very good at isolating the sound, because everything you saw at CES that I covered was incredibly noisy, yet this mic was able to isolate most of it out. And what's really nice about the AVX system is there's no configuration, there's no frequencies to set. It basically runs on the old cordless phone frequencies around 800 megahertz, I believe. And what it'll do is set up a number of different channels. So if it ever encounters interference, it's always got a secondary redundant channel already in operation that it just switches to seamlessly. You never even hear it. And I have yet to have a problem with this system no matter where I use it. It is just remarkable. Again, you got the choice between the stick mic or the lavalier mic, but you do need a separate receiver for every audio device that you want to attach. So I am kind of limited to 2 mics here with this system, but that's generally all I usually need. There's a little battery here on the receiver. These last probably a couple hours, so it's not as long as the battery will on the packs, but they all charge via USB, including the mic batteries. So I have a little battery from Anker that I walk around with just in case I run low on charge. I can just pop those things in via USB and get them juiced up again. The nice thing about this, though, is that it's tied into the phantom power coming out of the mic port here. So once we close the camera up, it automatically shuts the mic receiver off, so you're able to preserve battery that way. They thought about a lot of this kind of stuff as people encounter those things. I have a second battery in here for the camcorder, and I also have another camcorder here as well. This is a little consumer Sony 4K camera. This is their FDR AX33. I think the guts of this camera are very similar to this one because the images look very close on both, and we use this one just as a fallback in case this camera decides to stop working, or we want to do a multi-camera shot like we did with the Silicon Dust interview. So this is a good little camera to have as a fail-safe, and if worse comes to worse, I can charge the battery here with a USB connection just by plugging this into the camera and the camera into my battery pack. So it's a camera in addition to a charger, so it works pretty well. Very, very compact, and if I'm ever at a point where we want to send off a third person to go cover a few things, we can send them off with this camera and get all that done. What's neat about this camera is that it's got a great stabilizer on it. The stabilizer on this one is good, but this one has an optical stabilizer in addition to its digital stabilization, so it is like rock solid here. Let me put the battery in real quick so you can see what that looks like. So let's power it up here, and there we go. You can see that lens kind of floating around inside the cavity here, so it's really good at stabilizing the image while you're shooting handheld. So really good stuff, but again, the stabilization on the main Sony here is also pretty nice. Also in here was another deal that they had at B&H before I left. I had this like really lousy light from Polaroid that was cheap and bright and got the job done, but it wasn't very well built. This one I got for I think about $70 with the batteries on the back of it here. Very, very bright, and seems to be, it really worked great throughout the entire trip here. So you can see, whoa, just how bright that light gets there, and has a varying color temperature. So you can, let me see if I can turn it down a little bit here. You can adjust the overall color temperature of the light here, and Goldie has a producing background, so she was able to find the best way to adjust the light while we were out there. So really good light, a little on the heavier side, so the camera rig does tend to get a little heavy with this thing. It is metal, but extremely well built, and I could not beat the price. And these batteries are really easy to find, so if you ever run low on battery, you can just get a couple more of these things and you're off and running. I think it's based on an old Sony format. So that's the main pocket here, and then in the back pocket, and a couple of other things to show you. So this is my little box of SD cards. This case from Pelican that I got a while ago is really, really handy here. So I keep all my SD cards in here. I usually go with the SanDisk cards just because they have really long warranties on them, and I've never really had a problem with SanDisk before. So I've always found just get the best card you can because you don't have more than one chance at recording stuff. And the worst thing I wanted to do was get back to the hotel at night and have nothing. So going with the reliable cards is important. I do tend to buy a few new cards before I head out because I tend to really work these cards hard when I'm out in the field. And I usually go with the newer cards first before I go back to some of my older ones. This is a card reader, just the usual Kensington thing here. These are great. They connect via USB 3. I've got a USB 3 to USB Type-C cable in the bag there. I have an extra little Samsung T5 hard drive for editing in case my main drive goes down on me. And what I was using on this trip for editing was this one that I reviewed from CalDigit a while ago. They did send this to the channel free of charge. And this is a super rugged drive. It's also a solid-state drive. It's a terabyte SSD, so you can't destroy this thing. It's really well suited for traveling out in the field, and it has plenty of space for editing video. Now, what I was doing, because they got the face recognition working on the camera this year for autofocus, is we were shooting at 4K, and then I was editing at 1080p. And what's nice about doing that, is that we can zoom in on parts of the image without it losing its clarity. And that's one of the advantages of shooting in 4K, is that you do get a little bit of an ability to cheat. The downside is, though, it takes a lot of space up on the disk. So I think there's about 500 or 600 gigabytes of video stored on here based on what we took out of the camera and all the edits that were made. So you really need a lot of disk space for editing those 4K videos. And the other thing in here is a battery that came in free of charge from Anker a while back. This is just a standard USB charging battery, but both of these ports can output up to 2 amps on this one, which is really helpful for charging my phone and other devices if need be. We didn't use it all that much, actually, because the battery life out of all of these devices was getting us through the entire day. But just in case I forgot to charge something at night or whatever, I had the battery here as a fail-safe. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I have my MacBook Pro in the back pocket here that I use for editing, but really we could fit the entire operation in a single backpack, which is always the goal here. It is just to travel thin and light and just run around that show floor as fast as possible, finding as much as we can. And I was really trying to get at least 10 or 15 minutes or so of content produced for the dispatches every day that we were out there. So it's kind of a mad rush, and you never know what you're going to find. You could end up just walking around aimlessly for a couple of hours before you find a section that has a lot of cool stuff that was worth seeing. But what's neat about this whole setup here is that this hasn't changed really over the last 3 years. I've really found something that works for me, and this is what I use every time because I know it's going to give me the best possible results for what I want to produce here on the channel.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters, the Black Eyed and Blues Music Hour podcast, Chris Allegretta, Steve Blixt, Stanley Taub, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.